Hello, everyone. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. I have to say, this is exactly the kind of trouble that can turn poor Charles upside down in a heartbeat. Drew Kane has already got enough problems on his plate, but instead of slowing down and rebuilding his life, he seems determined to pick a fight with Sonny Corinthos. And folks, that is one fight I would not want to be anywhere near. What really catches my attention is how quickly Drew's focus has shifted. His biggest problem used to be Michael, and his anger toward Willow has been building for quite some time. But now Sonny is firmly in his sights, and that changes the whole game. Drew is no longer just dealing with a family feud. He is stepping into a much more dangerous fight against one of the most powerful men in Port Charles. Sonny clearly sees Drew as a growing threat too. That is why he turned to Rick Lansing on August 12, looking for a way to make sure Drew walks away with nothing. To me, that move says a lot. Sonny may not be running the same kind of organization he once did, but nobody should mistake that for weakness. The man still knows how to protect what matters to him, and he certainly knows how to deal with someone who comes after him. Meanwhile, Drew appears ready to meet Sonny head-on at the auction involving Jen Sidwell's valuable assets. That is where things could get especially ugly. Drew wants to weaken Sonny's influence in Port Charles, and I can understand why he thinks taking those assets would give him an advantage. But honestly, I keep wondering if Drew has stopped to think about what happens after he wins. Because winning one battle against Sonny does not mean the war is over. In fact, it could be the moment everything gets much worse. What bothers me most about Drew is that he had a real chance to step back and rebuild his life. He is no longer being held captive, and he has an opportunity to repair his relationship with Scout. That should be his priority. If I were in his shoes, I would be spending every minute trying to get my family back together instead of looking for another enemy. But Drew seems to be going in the opposite direction. The more pressure he feels, the more aggressive he becomes. And now he is putting himself directly in Sonny's path. That is a dangerous place to stand because Sonny has spent years surviving situations that would have broken most people. Let's be honest, Sonny may have stepped away from the mob life, but that does not suddenly make him harmless. Port Charles knows exactly what kind of man he can be when someone pushes him too far. Drew may think he is making a smart business move, but Sonny could see it as a personal challenge. And once Sonny takes something personally, I have a feeling this fight is going to become much bigger than an auction. It could drag Michael, Willow, Scout, and the rest of their families into a mess that nobody can easily escape. That's the part that makes me nervous. Because when two stubborn men like Drew and Sonny start pushing each other, innocent people are often the ones who pay the highest price. The more I look at this Drew and Sonny situation, the more I think Drew may have picked the wrong man to challenge. Sonny is not the kind of person who stays down after taking a hit. He may lose a round, he may be forced to change his plans, but somehow he always finds another way back into the game. And right now, that is exactly what makes this situation so dangerous for Drew. What really stands out to me is the timing. Drew has barely managed to get his own life back under control, yet he is already looking for another battle. His problems with Willow are still hanging over him, his family situation is far from settled, and his relationship with Scout needs attention. Instead of taking a breath and thinking about what comes next, Drew is putting his energy into challenging Sonny. That tells me he is still operating from anger rather than good judgment. And Sonny, meanwhile, is preparing for a completely different kind of fight. Recent spoilers have Sonny getting ready for battle while Drew reveals his own plan, which makes it pretty clear that neither man is willing to simply back down. What I find especially interesting is that Sonny is now trying to move away from the mob. Maurice Bernard himself recently explained that Sonny can still maintain power through business and influence even if he is no longer living the old gangster life. That distinction matters. Because I think Drew may be looking at the old Sonny when he should be watching the new one. Drew could be expecting Sonny to respond with the same kind of violence and intimidation we have seen in the past. But if Sonny is serious about changing his life, he may choose something much smarter. Money, business connections, information, legal pressure, and personal leverage can hurt a rival just as badly without Sonny ever needing to go back to his old ways. And that is where Willow's situation becomes extremely important. Willow was able to keep Drew under control because Jack Brennan had damaging information that could be used against him. That kind of leverage is incredibly powerful in Port Charles. You do not necessarily need to destroy somebody when you can simply make them afraid of what will happen if they cross you. So I keep asking myself, what happens if Sonny finds something similar? Maybe Sonny gets access to Brennan's information. Maybe he discovers another secret Drew desperately wants to keep hidden. Or maybe Sonny does not need a single explosive piece of evidence at all. He could simply start pulling at the loose threads in Drew's life until everything begins to unravel. That, to me, would be far more interesting than Sonny simply coming after Drew with brute force. Think about it. Drew is already surrounded by complicated relationships. He has problems with Willow, tension with Michael, concerns involving Scout, and now an increasingly dangerous connection with Ava Jerome. Every one of those relationships gives Sonny another possible angle. If Sonny starts connecting those dots, Drew could suddenly find himself fighting battles on 5 different fronts, and Ava is one of the biggest wild cards here. I have learned one thing watching Ava over the years. You never want to assume you know exactly what she is thinking. Her alliance with Drew may look useful right now, but alliances in Port Charles have a funny way of turning into traps. Recent speculation has already tied Ava and Drew together in a potentially messy and dangerous situation. If Ava believes Drew can help her gain something from Sonny, she may be willing to stand beside him for now. But what happens when the pressure gets too high? What happens when Sonny starts pushing back? And what happens if Ava realizes that Drew's war is becoming her war? That is when I think things could get ugly. Drew may believe he is challenging Sonny for control of valuable assets connected to Jen Sidwell, but the real prize could be much bigger than those assets. This is about influence. It is about who gets to make decisions in Port Charles and who has enough power to make everyone else think twice before crossing them. Sonny understands that better than almost anybody. He has spent decades building relationships, surviving betrayals, and dealing with enemies who thought they had finally found a way to bring him down. Even now, with Sonny trying to leave the mob behind, the character's power has not simply disappeared. Maurice Bernard recently said that what matters to Sonny is maintaining power, and that power does not have to come from being a gangster. That is a pretty important clue for what could happen next. If Sonny beats Drew through business, strategy, or leverage instead of violence, I actually think that could make the story even stronger. It would show that Sonny has evolved without becoming weak. He can walk away from the old life and still prove that he is a man nobody should take lightly. Drew, on the other hand, seems to be moving in the opposite direction. The more pressure he faces, the more aggressive his decisions become. He had an opportunity to focus on rebuilding his relationship with Scout and repairing some of the damage around him. Instead, he is choosing another power struggle. I cannot help thinking that this could eventually cost him more than he expects. And Scout is the part that concerns me most. Children always end up paying the price when adults turn personal conflicts into wars. Drew may think he is fighting for control or revenge, but Scout does not care who wins an auction or who has more influence in Port Charles. She needs her father to be present, stable, and trustworthy. If Drew continues down this road, he risks damaging the very relationship he should be protecting. That is why I think Sonny could actually have the advantage. Sonny has something Drew desperately needs right now: patience. Drew wants results. He wants revenge. He wants to regain control. Sonny knows that sometimes the best move is to wait. Let the other person make mistakes. Let them become comfortable. Let them believe they are winning. Then you make your move. And boy, when that move finally comes, Drew may realize he has been playing a much smaller game than Sonny. There is also the possibility that Sonny's response could affect Michael and Willow in ways neither of them expects. Drew's original anger has been tied closely to his family problems, and Sonny's involvement could turn those private wounds into a much larger conflict. Michael could find himself caught between people he loves, while Willow could discover that the leverage she once had over Drew is no longer enough to keep him under control. That is the domino effect I am watching. One decision from Drew leads to Sonny responding. Sonny's response forces Ava to choose a side. Ava's decision affects Drew. Drew reacts again, and suddenly Michael, Willow, and Scout are caught in the middle. That is how a Port Charles feud becomes a full-blown disaster, and I would not underestimate Rick Lansing either. Sonny has already turned to Rick for help, which tells me Sonny is willing to use every tool available to him. Rick is not exactly the person I would want sitting across the table from me if I were already in trouble. He knows how to look for weaknesses, and Drew has certainly given his enemies plenty to examine. Drew may believe he is coming for Sonny's position, but Sonny could be preparing to take away everything Drew has been trying so hard to build. If Ava remains on Drew's side, she could find herself dragged into the fallout as well. And once this conflict starts affecting family, business, and personal relationships all at once, nobody in Port Charles is going to be completely safe. For me, that is the real danger here. This is no longer just Drew versus Sonny. It is the beginning of a power struggle that could pull half of Port Charles into the mess. And if Sonny really decides to fight back, Drew may soon discover that challenging Sonny was the easy part. Surviving the consequences could be the hardest part of all.